fattore intende
Toda experiência esta step.
Fondation Jean-Jaurès.
Penser pour agir.
Hello, hi. So Bosnia-Herzegovina has recently hit the headlines in French major newspapers. To understand the reasons why, we'll get to discuss this topic today with Adnan Ćerimagić, senior analyst at the European Stability Initiative. Hi, Adi.
Hi, Florent. Thank you for having me.
Please. The situation in Bosnia-Herzegovina has recently again hit a new low point. War rhetoric is on the rise, secessionist threats are carried out, and stability is more fragile than ever. How worried should we be, Adi, about the situation now, and what should the EU do to address this very immediate challenge?
I think we need to be very much worried about the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but for international community, even for European community to take a step to do something, it really needs to be motivated to do it. And many who have been following Bosnia and Herzegovina here and there when it comes to the international media might or are asking themselves, why? What's the point? Because if you see how Bosnia has been described in European and international media in the past 5 or 10 years, has been described as a country that is deeply divided along the ethnic lines, where ethnic groups are not working with each other or not living with each other, where just earlier this year, Political Europe had a big article on Bosnia-Herzegovina claiming that it's a failed state. So when you have a crisis like this, people ask, so what is there to be worse than it is, than the situation is? But the reality of Bosnia-Herzegovina cannot be more different than what the clichés and what the people or what the international media are writing about Bosnia-Herzegovina. In past 26 years, we have seen the country move back with its multi-ethnic character. Every fourth person in Bosnia-Herzegovina today lives in a municipality where their own ethnic group is not in majority. In a Bosnian-Herzegovinian entity of Republika Srpska, where authorities, a coalition government, has come out in October with a plan to collapse institutional and constitutional architecture of Bosnia-Herzegovina, and where the center of the current crisis is 200,000 non-Serbs today are living. We have a big group of institutions that have been developed at the state level: military, judiciary, tax. Our entire medicine market in the country is run by an institution at the state level. So the level of how much we've integrated Bosnia-Herzegovina in the last 26 years is really incredible. And throughout that time, Bosnia-Herzegovina has remained a peaceful country, and it's a huge achievement. So that's what is at stake today, because the coalition government in Republika Srpska is saying, we want to dismantle this. We have a plan. We want to collapse all these institutions that we have had at the state level, and we want to go back to something that they believe has existed in 1996. But to do that unilaterally and against the constitutions really means to bring the entire country into the chaos. Just medicine, you can't import the medicine without the state level institutions. So at this moment, the EU and the international community really needs to focus to react to the situation that we have at the moment.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the cliché we have, and you also mentioned all the challenges on the ground. The fact, indeed, that ethno-nationalism is very strong in political discourses, that we have state capture in the region, so also especially in Bosnia-Herzegovina, corruption, bureaucracy, poverty. 20% of the population is affected by it. Economic growth, which is quite low. But we do have citizen protests in the country. We have citizens' movements fighting to change things. So we have this contrasting picture. And we have the EU. You mentioned the EU on the background a little bit, which is an interesting point, because the EU isn't big on background, but it's supposed to provide guidance to support transition. How do you assess the role of the EU, its impacts on the development in Bosnia-Herzegovina in the past 20 years, and perhaps also in the light of the revised accession policy?
Well, one misperception that people from outside have about Bosnia-Herzegovina in the past 26 years is that many of the things that I've described to you now, from the joint army to the medicinal agency at the state level, that they are the result of the international community saying this needs to happen, and then it happened. But in reality, it's much more complex. Yes, international community has driven the process. In particular, the EU has driven these processes and supported these processes. But it was the local actors who then implemented it, have come together and did it. And the reason why they were doing in 2003, 2006, many outsiders will tell you it's because the OHR, or the Office of High Representative, was powerful, because Americans were saying you need to do this. But in reality, back then, Bosnians were seeing both Croatia, Slovenia, Central and Eastern Europe, even Serbia moving towards the EU, becoming part of the EU. So when you had to build a state-level medicinal institution, medicinal agency in order to trade with the EU according to the trade agreement that was signed, people in Republika Srpska were engaged in doing that. Were they in love with having it at a state level? Were they in love with Bosnia-Herzegovina? No, they were never. But they thought it was giving them some kind of a benefit. Today, we don't have that. And that is the problem. That's why we first have seen, status quo, not going further. And now we see, going backwards. And that's where the EU is failing, not just Bosnia-Herzegovina, but the region in general. There is no accession process. There is no accession process for Montenegro or Serbia at the moment. So how can there be something for Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is way behind these countries? And unless we have EU not trying to manage crisis, to try to prevent them, slow down them, try to avoid conflict, which is good, we will be in this perpetual, going around bad news circles. At the moment when the EU really has some kind of an offer for the Western Balkans that is attractive enough, but that 27 can come around them, then we will see a reversal of the processes. And the new methodology is not doing that. We see that clearly across the region.
You mentioned going backwards, so from being stalled to going backwards. To try to look at that a different way, the EU has gone in promoting a more geopolitical view or type of engagements. I would like to ask you, because indeed there are the interests of external powers which have been strengthened in the region, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, when you think about the role of Russia, quite successful disruptive communications, the role of China granting loans and so on. So there is this idea that there are some geopolitical stakes in the region, but is it an appropriate way for the EU to raise its level of engagement and win the hearts by arguing that it's doing it for geopolitical purposes?
I think that the hearts and minds of the Western Balkan citizens have been won. They are on the EU side. When you look at where they move to work, where they go to study, if you just look at the news and read what the opinion makers in the countries are saying, what the EU is failing to do is to have a policy and a process that this heart and mind can then transform into concrete policies that win elections, and that when the reforms are not done, then lead to losing elections. I think that the contrast of North Macedonia and Serbia shows that we are where we are at the moment. On one hand, we have the North Macedonia government that not just dealt with internally with minorities, with captured state, but also with its neighbors. And on the other hand, we have Serbia, which is having all the issues that it has at the moment internally, from dealing with the past to dealing with the neighbors. We see that the politicians, who want to run on the platform of the EU cannot deliver because there is no process and there is nothing to give the EU. In Serbia, on the other hand, we see when the politicians are not delivering on the reform, and when they're saying we're not doing what we should be doing to get into the EU, they can't be, let's say, punished, or there can't be, elections where they would be replaced with someone or something who would then be part of some kind of a process. So I see across the region, as you said, protests, citizens, businesses saying we belong to the EU. We want to further integrate with the EU. We want the process of making things better in the region. On the other hand, we see politicians, institutions dealing with the fact that that kind of a process is not offered. It doesn't exist. New methodology doesn't open an interim steps for the countries that they can achieve once the chapters or once the parts of the chapters are closed and once the alignment is achieved. And that is a big problem that, France, with its EU presidency and the conference in the June should be addressing.
Perfect. So you mentioned France, who just took over the presidency of the Council, and it puts the Western Balkans on its agenda so for the month to come. It will organize a Western Balkans summit. It has also signaled its ambition to re-engage in the region through a series of initiatives. What would be your recommendations to French authorities, very concretely, for the month and years to come? What should France do? What should it focus on?
Well, France needs to help Western Balkans by building a coalition inside the EU of 27 EU member states around an offer to the Western Balkans that is simple, understandable, but yet transformative and incredibly deep for the region. My think tank has been proposing for a couple of years now to offer to the Western Balkans a full membership in the EU single market in the way that Sweden or Austria have first become parts of the single market and then become full members of the EU as a second step. I think that becoming member of the single market would require rule of law reforms. It would require democratic changes. It would enable a process where, if you have a government like in North Macedonia and it's serious about the reforms, they would progress and would show other countries what they are missing and what they are failing at. And we would be back in the dynamics that we had in 2006, or 2007, 8, 9, 10, where even Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is considered as a country that is unable to do reforms and where changes are not possible, was doing tremendous reforms and tremendous changes. They're talking about 33 chapters, 6 clusters, maybe this program entering that program. It's very complicated in both political and practical terms to explain to citizens, to politicians, to the public. We need some offer which is big enough, which brings together a vision for the region in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think single market membership is one. There are proposals about customs union. There are proposals about increasing funding for the Western Balkans. All of that combined would then bring a vision for the Western Balkans that would further integrate, bring them closer to the EU, and where we could see the process, that the process is reversing and going in a way that those protesting, those calling for reforms in the region that exist and that are there would then be able to actually transform them into policies and into concrete changes and progress.
Thanks a lot, Eddie. So if I understand that well, we need to be worried about what's happening now in Bosnia-Herzegovina, but more generally also in the region. We need to see a response by the EU, an active one, to this situation. But what we need most of it is a vision for the region, for the country, something which goes beyond the daily business. And that's where maybe France can bring a small contribution. Thanks, Adi. Thanks a lot for your input and for this exchange. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Fondation Jean-Jaurès.
Penser pour agir.